Welcome to the No BS Short-Term Rental Podcast, an unfiltered look into the global vacation and short-term rental industry.
I'm Mateo Bradford.
And I'm John Stokinger.
And this is our podcast. We bring the right people to the table at the right time, giving you an inside view and take on the short-term rental industry like no other podcast can.
Good morning, Mateo. How are you?
Good morning, John. Brother, I am fantastic. As usual, man. Blessed and happy to be here. Happy Tuesday to you.
Happy Tuesday. We skipped a week. We don't often skip a week, but we did skip a week. Nothing went out last week. We're traveling and it just didn't work out with our schedules. So we're back at it. And we were traveling for the STR Wealth Conference. We're in Nashville. A very interesting show, high energy, lots of crazy takeaways, lots of interesting takeaways, a lot of great conversations. I do want to say that. And our guest today on No BS is the one and the only John Ann of Ohana Stays and TechTape. John, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, man. Welcome to the show, brother.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I've been wanting to get on your show for a while, and it's great that we're able to connect to talk about the STR Wealth Conference and then and other topics as well. So thanks for having me, man.
No,
Absolutely. Yeah. So interesting story. John was supposed to join us on an advocacy one we had probably 6 months ago or so, maybe longer. And it was just like him in Hawaii time. And it just, at that time, he's in Jersey now, and that's where he lives. But
it's okay.
Yeah, it's all right. We just thought you were.
We hadn't won him over yet, so we could, get him on.
No, I have to play hard to get.
Yeah, it's good. If this is fashionably late, you are the most dapper.
Yeah, no, by far. And to be fair, we would see John in person like all the time, and it was always good to connect. So like we understand. So we're happy to have you now. Thanks for jumping back on with us.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
let's talk about. I definitely want to get into the STR Wealth, but let's kind of tee you up a little bit and let's talk about why John and why are you on here? Those of us on the professional side of the industry know you and know you well. You are a staple in the circuits, around the industry. But talk to us about how did you get invested and started in hospitality? How did you start, on the focus on tech and everything you're doing? Like, what was your first, dipping your toe into, STR?
Yeah. Long story short, I am an architect by training. And so I was in the real estate world. I went out on my own and I did some single family new construction development on my own. And as you know, when you're doing development projects, cash is always flowing out until you sell. And so short-term rentals was literally just kind of a side asset to generate some, a small amount of positive cash flow while I'm doing my development projects. During that time, though, because I was trying to make it as passive as possible, I really invested a lot of time and energy in building the systems and technologies. And because of that, I've been rolling up my sleeves and trying many different technologies as an expert end user. And by doing that, I've gotten kind of a broad perspective of the tech landscape within our industry and how things work. There are people who know a lot more about very specific technology. And I think I kind of can see the overall picture and see how pieces fit together or don't fit together and what the problems are. And so once I had that, I started, during COVID, Clubhouse room where I talked about technology and got a lot of the CEOs of the tech companies joining the room. They didn't have anything better to do, and I didn't have anything better to do.
That's so funny.
And out of that, this kind of manifested.
Well, no, because I've learned some things about John recently that I can appreciate. Like at that dinner that we had, what I love about your journey, John, is I'm gonna give you your flowers, brother. You got a PhD in this space. You're a when you talk about the world that you come from, you are a professional coming into a new space, right? And to be able to make an imprint in the period of time that you had is actually it's pretty impressive. Like, and the tech side of it is interesting, but there's also the other play of like the advocacy side that you're on, right? Like, and that's how we met. How does a tech person get involved in an advocacy fight for an industry that he is so like really just coming in and making an impact on? Like, that's not the normal journey for a lot of people. Like, how did we end up here? How did you get into that?
Well, advocacy gets thrown your way, right? I was not a big, person on advocacy. In fact, when I started my business, I had looked up all the zoning and I thought I was golden. I thought, I was untouchable with regulations. And then some crazy regulations got thrown my way in my market. And
And your
fortunately,
market is, for those that don't know your
oh,
market is Honolulu specifically, correct?
yes, Honolulu and Hawaii.
Yeah.
And there was longstanding regulation, and then they flipped it upside down last August. No, 2 August ago, I guess.
2 August ago. Yep.
And fortunately, I was friends with David Krause from Rent Responsibly, and I had some friends in the industry. So I basically like, what do we do? And so I just had to like start firefighting, right? And along the way, to me, the most important thing is for our stakeholders to stay united. And it's very easy for, not intentionally, but for stakeholders to be like, you know, I'm in the hotel, I'm in the apartment space. So I don't care about single family homes. And, I do like everyone can find ways to kind of say, I'm okay. And those other guys are the problem. So my first thing was just get everyone together so that we don't step on each other's toes. And that was really kind of, I think, my value add to the advocacy fight. And that's what we're doing at the state level right now, getting all the stakeholders on a weekly call so that we stay united and coordinated.
What I mean, not to sit here and spend too much time on the advocacy here on Hawaii, because we have talked, and but it is super, super important. So I don't want to downplay it. Are you making positive strides? Where do you think this is going? Because I just read and we talked about this briefly at the beginning. I just read last week that, overall, the Board of Tourism for Hawaii is basically, taking itself apart, and they're no longer going to be pushing and advocating for tourists to come to Hawaii. With that said, we all know that tourists are still going to go to Hawaii. It's Hawaii. But there's no reason in their mindset to go ahead and promote it anymore when there is this, in their eyes, a fire to put out because there's too many tourists in there, whatever the case. Like, do you think a positive turn is happening, or where do you see this playing out, or how do you see this playing out?
Well, definitely there's a positive turn. One thing I'll say is while they say they don't want any more tourists, they are approving more and more hotels in residential areas. So, yeah,
Right.
it really makes sense, right? Positive outcome. One, we have built the muscle that we can activate thousands of people on a moment's notice when there are bills to be fought. And so this time around at the state level, there were lots of multiple bills that were essentially trying to legalize governmental takings of your property. But we were able to get people to show up, testify, and we got those bills deferred.
Love
Uh,
that.
we are working. We are actually creating a state level alliance at this point. And we have reps from the Big Island, from Maui, and we're finding someone from Kauai, and obviously Oahu, so that we can work at the state level now. And we're getting a lot of support from the industry, from the VRMA Advocacy Fund, from Rent Responsibly. And so I would say there are definitely positive trends, but we're trying to be more offensive than always defensive, which is the game that we've been playing up till now. So I feel positive about it, but it's a lot of work and time and effort that I had never imagined I would be spending.
Well, kudos to you and all those out there doing it, because it's important work, and you guys have made some big strides. So yeah, great work. Keep up the good work.
And let's not underplay like the ability to, yeah, I 100% kudos to that, but like to be on the offensive, like you actually have to be there. And so I think the key takeaway for everyone listening to this podcast is you can't be offensive if you're not showing up 6, 7 months, 8 months, a year, 2 years. Like if you're in a location, and we talk about this, we're beating this drum again.
Yeah.
If you're in a location that everything's peachy keen and nothing's wrong, guess what? shit's going to go wrong sometimes. Start showing up to your local meetings, make yourself known, be the professional in your industry, in your community, show the up. Like you have to be there, because when you need to mobilize, when you need to go ahead and do this, like it's super, super important that you've already built that network. And so you can go on the offensive.
Right.
The legislators, if they know someone that, they know who knows that topic, they'll reach out to you and say, hey, we're talking about short-term rentals, can you educate me on this? If they don't know it, they're going to take the same storyline that the hotels have been feeding down, the industry's throat, and make decisions based on those narratives, right? So it's kind of like networking in business. You can't just one day show up and ask someone to work with them, right? You have to have built a relationship in order to, develop that trust. So,
Or that LinkedIn, or that first LinkedIn message you get for someone and they start pitching you and you're like, dude, come on.
yeah.
I love it. We're really proud of you and what you're doing on that side of things. And I think that overall, how you and I say you as in John, but I mean like the whole group of everyone that you're working together. Like I think other communities and other municipalities can look at what you're doing and take a lot of great lessons of how you're attacking this and bring it to their own communities. Well, Mateo's doing the same thing with Astra in Atlanta and that whole group there, a lot of positive things. Learn from the mistakes, learn from the positive outcomes of these different, advocacy efforts, and apply the learning. Like you don't have to start from the ground zero every time. There's a lot of work that's been done, and utilize rent responsibility. I cannot emphasize this enough. No, they are not a sponsor of the podcast, but they are great friends, and they are. And speaking of, total shout out, Mateo and I are very, very excited to be on the upcoming Rent Responsibly. In April, there's a podcast takeover virtual summit. So we're excited to have a presentation and that as well on day 2. Yeah, so we're excited about that. All right, back to John. I know we want to get into the show. We want to talk about the STR Wealth, but let's talk about TechTape a little bit. You've put yourself in a position where you, by default or by immersing yourself in the world of STR and the tech, because you are a user, you are trying it all out, you're trying to understand what works together. Like, what is TechTape? Like, to those that don't know, what the hell is TechTape, John? Like,
yeah, and why did you want to become a vendor in this space right now? Right, bringing something new and next ballsy move.
Are your hands full enough?
I guess I think of myself as a problem solver, right? And so when I run into a problem, my motto is if I run into the same problem 2 or 3 times, that means there's a systematic solution to it, right? And so that's how I built my business. But what I see in the industry, because I have a lot of friends who are operators, is different people are running into the same problems over and over and over again. So tremendous amount of wasted effort of time, energy, stress. So the name TechTape, it's duct tape for the STR industry, right? So there's a lot of amazing technology solutions out there, probably too many, but they don't all talk to each other. They don't all work with each other. And so, what I was doing was trying to switch one from the other, trying to solve a problem. That problem would get solved, but then things that were working would get broken. So what TechTape really does is it takes what would be considered the best in class for whatever issue you're trying to solve within the industry. And the best in class might be different for me than for you and for different people. And as long as it's solving a specific problem, then making the technologies work together, even if the developers of the technology haven't integrated it perfectly yet, right? So that's really the fundamental behind TechTape. And so it's not like a general technology piece. It's actually for people who have experience running their tech stack, know and can identify a couple, very specific pain points, and then we can work together to kind of solve those pain points. So
John, you're MacGyver.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a formalized approach, but yes, it's a MacGyver approach, and I call it defragmenting the fragmented tech space, right? Making the technology make sense for your business, so that's what TechTape provides. And then on top of that, we also provide revenue management services. Just another area that a lot of folks struggle with, and we've found a systematic approach.
So for those that are listening, if your tech stack is, if you're happy with your tech stack or you're not happy with your tech stack, but for whatever reason, there are pieces that aren't working as seamlessly as possible, that aren't, they're not talking to each other, or there's a part of your tech that's just like, man, what the fuck? This could be doing this better. Like, talk to John, reach out to TechTape, and if he doesn't have a solution, he can help you come up with a solution. Did I say that
Sure.
correct?
Yes,
John
that's it.
MacGyver and of TechTape, founder and CEO.
I think this will take us like where we're going to next, John. So like ideally, what is that? What's your ideal client type? Like who is TechTape for today?
TechTape is for someone who has, a year or two at least of experience under their belt, have already felt the pain of trying to run a seamless short-term rental company.
Mhm.
It's not that I don't want to work with, someone who's just jumping in, but when you're just jumping in, you just don't know what that pain point is yet. And so that's when you're like, chasing the shiny object, right? And it's actually when hey, this is really my pain point, that's when we can work together to try to solve it.
Love it, love it, love it. So great. There will be a link to John to get a hold of John in the website. There'll be a link to get a hold of if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or however you listen to, or on YouTube, however you go ahead and consume No BS Short-Term Rental Podcast. There will be a link to go ahead and learn more about John and TechTape. And if you do love our podcast, do us a solid. Go ahead and give us a 5-star review. Leave a written review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. We truly, truly appreciate it. And thank you.
Yeah. And if you're on YouTube, like, listen, subscribe, hit that notification button. You know the drill. That's much appreciated. We're grateful. Thank you.
Let's talk about STR Wealth. There was a ton of buzz about STR Wealth. And me, in my new role at Direct, I said, we need to be there. I said, Direct needs to be there. There's 1,000 attendees. Most of them are hosts or investors in that space. They are getting their feet wet, or their feet are wet, but they're more, might have 5, they might have 2 properties. A lot of people I talked to had 1 property. They're just getting really excited about it, but they're looking to scale. They're looking to grow. There's a lot of excitement around STR and where we're going. And I watched some videos from last year before I made the call. I talked to some people, and to me, I'm like, all right, this is an interesting gamble from a vendor to go in, but I think it makes sense. And we all attended. There was a lot of people in attendance, 1,000 plus. Actually, there's more than 1,000, because there's lots of people that I know, that we all know, that couldn't get tickets, that still showed up to Nashville. Mateo being, they still showed up to Nashville.
Yeah.
And there was like masterminds going around, like on outside. There's all sorts of people outside of that didn't actually get their foot in the door, but were still participating in the buzz that is STR Wealth. So I guess, first of all, kudos to the team there for building an excitement, and like, this is only year 2, over 1,000 attendees.
And of the 1,000 attendees, it's mostly attendees and not as many vendors, right? Some other conferences, it's like half vendors or more sometimes.
We went there. We went there, no disrespect to Verma, Spring Forum, just a few weeks earlier, it was 2/3 vendors. It was like, and we already talked about it. I'm not going to sit here and bash Verma. We're proud Verma. We're all VRMA members.
Yeah.
Love what Verma's doing. hope they can turn this around. I know they will turn this around. But let's go back to, where are we going? I see your face, Teo.
There's a gap that needs to be bridged. And again, I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but I feel like this is just the truth. Like, the reason STR Wealth is successful is because they've tapped into a pool with something different, with something that's exciting, with something that is courting a group that we've done a horrible job of courting and bringing into the fold of our space of hospitality. And I don't give a shit about bickering around names and these other things, but there is a gap that is clearly being filled by other entities because no one's addressing it and no one's talking about it. And it is a discussion that I think VRMA needs to have with itself in terms of its identity and being as large as it is and as important as it is to our industry. But there's a level of growth I think that needs to happen that they would be 100% the beneficiary of, the industry would be 100% the beneficiary of, because we're all in this thing together. And the more of us that are in this space together and are creating an environment that, regardless of the stage or space that you're at, that you are learning professional practices, you're aware of the technology, you're building a good business, you're, aligned in the regulatory fights, like all of the things, and you know where to go for resources, right? Like the things VRMA has, these people need, right? It's awesome and the thing that I love about the STR Wealth is like, yeah, it's generating, it's the business side of me, like generate the business, get the business. But then I feel like there's a second part that has to be talked about. That's like, all right, you got it, but what do you do now?
Right.
Right? Like, now what? Right? Now you've got it. Now you've got to grow. Now you've grown. Now you've scaled. Now you've done all the things. But now, how do you make it successful? How do you make it profitable? How do you, weigh your risks? How do you learn how to build from 10 to 20 to 200, right? Like with other people, like you're in a different ball game now.
I
And
agree. I agree, and I think that the interesting thing, and I want to get to that next step and what that is, but I also want to get what's your initial takeaway? Did you go to, first of all, this your second STR Wealth?
Yes, I went last year.
Okay,
So
so what are your takeaways from now coming 2 years to STR Wealth?
So first and foremost, you're exactly right. This is like, I call it like a parallel universe of short-term rentals, right? There's one universe at the VRMA, there's one at STR Wealth, and then there's another one at IMN. And so they're like disparate markets, but we're all in the same space, and we do need to unify. So that's one. The other thing is what's really exciting, and like, the buzz around STR Wealth is it's part kind of like mastermind, like Tony Robbins type, like you can do it. We've done it. Other people have done it. You can do it. That kind of motivational, but there is substance behind it, right? And I'm not saying Tony Robbins doesn't have substance. I'm just saying,
no,
there is substance
the
behind
energy. Yeah, I get what
right.
you.
The
It's
energy.
it's kind of hokey a little bit, a little bit, looking out and again, I don't want to come across in a bad way, and I wasn't sure if I was going to use this word, but I am going to use the word. And this is no disrespect to what they're doing. For those that are, it's a little bit predatory, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but there's a capitalization aspect of it. Like everything's really fucking expensive. There's like they're building a FOMO atmosphere that, like, if you don't come to the show right now and learn these tips and tricks to go ahead and be successful, you're gonna be on the outside. And there's nothing wrong with that, but at the same time, I feel that those that aren't well grounded, that don't have a good solid business foundation, that just go into it like, very excited because of the flash and bang and that it could be, not everyone's gonna come out of it. They're gonna invest and they're gonna maybe possibly make some bad decisions, but that's life and it is what it is. And I don't. So it's not a bad thing. It's just, that's my take on the vibe. Sorry, back to you, John.
Well, I mean, definitely. I mean, it's a business venture, right? it's to make money, and you know, we're all out to make money, right? I would flip what you said, John, a little bit. Yes, they're creating the buzz and everything so that there's FOMO, but that is what's actually creating the excitement around it and like drawing a lot of people. And again, for example, if VRMA could tap into that kind of
100%.
way to draw people in, it could be pretty amazing, right? So the thing that I would say is VRMA as well, some people spend a lot of money going to those and don't get a lot out of it either, right? So I would say,
Yay, touche.
I was gonna say, in all fairness, like none of it is cheap. But I think what you see is look at the amount of people that are willing to invest in themselves and their business and getting better. And if anything is to be learned, I mean, I think, again, it's the VRMA is in the position to, be able to do these things and bring this in and bring this into a part of the organization. But, and I think everyone's the beneficiary because it's going to force them to do new and exciting things that everyone wants to see from VRMA, right? Like, I think that being able to do that and it's spread and get a creative mindset and start doing new things is what I hear more often than not. Like people are just tired of the same. And that's a challenge. And, but again, I also think it's going to take the membership of VRMA to get active and make those changes, right? It's, the vendors and the managers are going to have to get involved and work with VRMA to make the changes that, they feel like they want to see within the organization. My personal take is like, that's what it will take is people getting involved. I think it can and will happen. I think for this, for the organization to succeed, which we all want. And yeah, if you don't do it, somebody else will. And we're seeing that right now.
and what, a lot of the folks, at the STR Wealth Conference, particularly many of the speakers and whatnot, like some are, definitely a part of VRMA and active. But if we could get more of those folks active in VRMA, like think about the possibilities, right?
100%.
100%.
Yeah.
Like there are certain players, like if VRMA was mine and I'm running VRMA, there's certain players and there's certain players, I mean, like have a following that, have a bunch of, social like we know that world runs on social and it's all like, it's very, I think if VRMA would reach out to some of these people, give a few, come on, let's work together. Let's bring this in. I'm going to take care of you. We're going to get you a speaking spot. Let's go ahead and it would be super smart. I think kind of, oh, this is a great kind of how.
But I mean, we do see that this year. Like, shout out to Brooke. Like, Brooke was out there. Brooke's doing his thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, vice versa, the other way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The other way. Like, so what I'm thinking.
But I think pulling it in, because you need more of both going each direction, right? Like, that's why you have to pull it in, right?
It's like this is the tech tape or the duct tape of the conference world. Like, how do we get them to talk better together? How do we get us to work together in an alliance, not as in 3 separate or 4 separate or 5 separate different conferences? And you got to look at it from a vendor standpoint as well. Like we are, Direct is a scrappy startup, Guest Store is a scrappy startup, TechTapes scrappy startup, right? There isn't infinite money to be going ahead and attending at all these conferences. Right. Me, in my role, I had to go and look at the whole landscape of conferences for the year, knowing that there's going to be 2 or 3 more like events that are peppered in that I just need to attend. So I have to side budget that money, set it aside, and I have to pick and choose.
Yeah.
Not all of us have the guesty money and the TNS money and the whole Inhabit money that could go to everything. We don't. We have to, if we work better together, we maybe take some of these conferences and consolidate them, or like have these 2 entities together to make this power conference that might be 1 day longer. I don't know. There's so many different things that could be done. I think people are starting to think about it, but just like the consolidation of tech, we're going to have to actually look at the consolidation of travel in regards to conference. And let's talk about the sustainability side of this as well. Of like, and like what we need to do as an industry to, we can't just all be globetrotting everywhere to go ahead and it just doesn't make sense. Environmentally, like for ethically, I can list all the alleys.
No, I mean, that's a good point, John. You bring up an excellent point around the sustainable aspect of it also, right? And I think what we've seen and what we're seeing now, in terms of even, yes, the economics of it, like people are looking at ROI right now, right? Like, there's, being honest about like where we are within this space. And, you know, there's uh, the ROI question comes up quite a bit. You and I both know, like we talk about it all the time with people and, managers and others. And John, I think even, from your perspective, uh, as, where you sit in the space too, I'm sure you see it. Like people are calculating, their returns. And as things
Yeah.
get more expensive, we're seeing people make decisions. And I think you see that on, the amount of people that aren't at these places as well.
Let's talk about the positives. And there were a lot of positives about STR Wealth.
Oh,
I
yeah.
want to talk, what was your favorite? I think John and I have talked, and we both had our favorite presentation at STR Wealth. It was really enlightening. And I would have taken that at any conference as like, wow, what a great presentation. John, what was your, takeaways on like the positive presentations there?
Well, again, it was packed with a lot of great content, right? And I was sitting and listening to pretty much every presentation. There are a couple that I had to step out for, some other things. But let me just kind of give a shout out to, at least some of the people who are presenting, if I can.
Yeah.
So Will Flicker and Julie George emceed the whole thing. Tony and Sarah Robinson, the Real Estate Robinsons, had something on social media, which, kind of woke me up. And I was like, you know what? I should start doing videos and, things like that, right? There was Jeff Hampton on legal, and you don't usually talk about how to set up your legal foundation.
I like
That
that
was
one. I actually caught some
yeah,
of that as well. That was a great pivot. That was good.
yeah, and everyone runs into that same problem, and here's someone who solved it, right? Avery Carl, Kenny Bedwell, and then my boy Cody Woods was on the panel on data and whatnot. Minoan, Mark Havaski. I really liked Mike McKelowitz's profit first presentation. I have been, I've been exposed to it many times. I never took the action. Literally, I came back home, went Thursday, and then on Friday, I went to my bank and opened up the additional account so that I could start practicing the profit first. So, that was the kick in the pants for me. But
Was
last year,
that was the keynote, by the way. The keynote.
yeah, the keynote speaker. I mean, that's amazing to have a keynote speaker like that. For me, both last year and this year, I resonate a lot with what Mike Shogun has to present, right? So, last year he was talking all about kind of like mindset, and if you believe you can achieve something and you work towards it every day, it works. And like that really resonated with me. I started implementing some of his tactics, and it has worked, right? And so this time he was talking about boutique hotels, and that's something that I'm very interested in getting into. So that was important. But for me, the more important part was he talked about like the journey of a STR like side hustle going all the way to a STR chairman, right? So once you're a chairman, it's like completely passive, right? You check in once a week and that's about it. And so kind of looking on the time scale, where I see myself on the Ohana Stay side, and my wife is taking over Ohana Stay. So, you know, I'm on that path. I'm kind of like, I am the CEO, but there are still things that I need to shed in order to get towards the chairman, side of things, right? And so those things that Mike Shogun shared, it really resonated a lot with me. And those are the things that I'm going to be referring back to throughout the year, for everything.
Mike
You know,
Sugar's presentation was my favorite as well. And the the reason in looking at it and kind of to expand at least my version of it is that, great. He talked about like valuations and talking about, looking at acquisitions of, and I'm not in that business or mindset, but it was really intriguing to see the, that step. But where it went to for me is him just talking about, again, chairman role, right? Like, how do you get yourself there? How do you go ahead and surround yourself with people that you trust that are going to go ahead and do everything for you? And it was building of people, building of a team that just does what they need to do, that understands. And like everyone, whether you're going into a boutique hotel side of things, or if you're staying strictly in STR, like the knowledge that came out of that for me was like, fuck, every one of these property management companies, if they were look at it a little bit more like Mike's looking at it, are gonna, everything's gonna run a little bit more smoothly. Everything's gonna be if we're looking at profitability, like this is the key. Like this is how you go ahead and get there. And I took more out of that from a vendor standpoint that is not a property manager. I'm never going, well, I'm not gonna say never. Right now, my trajectory is I'm not going to be a property manager, right? That's not what I'm doing. But I still took a lot out of how he's running his business and businesses, him and his wife. It was great. It was a really thoughtful, well thought out, well presented presentation.
Yeah. No. So Mike's presentation always resonates with me. And, that's kind of the steps that I aspire towards in my businesses. Of course, Bill Faith had his presentation on kind of the active steps to take now to plan towards your retirement. Conceptually, that makes sense. But like having a weekly meeting with my wife on, all the steps, that I don't think I have the discipline to do. But it is like, if you're deliberate about something, then you're most likely going to achieve it, right? And that's really the message that Bill Faith was sharing. The women's panel with Rachel Gainsborough, Kristen Shogren, Avery Carl, Sarah Robinson, Julie George. I mean, man, these women are kicking ass, right?
Yeah.
Like they're kicking ass beyond like, anything I could even imagine for myself. And, it's just, it doesn't have to be women's panel, but it happens to be the women's panel, right? Like,
and I mean, we're one of the few industries where like we're looking at a close to 50-50 split, maybe even higher, 60-40 split. I don't know of the exact numbers, and maybe Mateo, you have it, of like women CEO, like C-suite level, like the STR world has a lot of powerful, and I don't want not downplaying
And
that.
that's on the vendor side of the business, right? And not even talking about the amount
Both
of women
sides.
property management companies out there, right? Like that are leading brands and organizations and companies, right? Like
I think it'd be a very interesting panel out of VRMA or one of these where you take a Rachel Gaisberg and you take a vendor side, like High's top CEO, and you take another professional, like a super, someone like that would be a really interesting panel from 5 different verticals, all within the STR space. But all that, I think that could be a pretty interesting panel. And then have someone like Amy Hideout or someone moderate it. Like again, I think there's an interesting play there.
I think because our
like
space,
that a lot, John. Like,
yeah, no, I think that'd be awesome. I think it's because our space is like super entrepreneurial. So like anyone can get started with anything, right? And I think that's why we have such a diverse, inclusive, and it's not even active inclusive. It just happens, right? It's not like we need a CEO who is a woman. It's like,
right. You're not checking the box and going ahead and putting in there or making up a C-suite, like a DEI C-suite space just to go ahead and check that friggin' box.
Exactly. It just exists.
It's like they're founders too, like Maddie and Margot, like they're founders. Like so like all these people in these space, they're founders, right? Amy Heino, like what she does in the space and what she's done in the space, like, and people don't know that she's associated with like the in a team, like in the early stages of that, like, right? Like this isn't, it's not something that was like, oh, we need to highlight this. So let's create this in the industry. It's already happening and been happening in our industry and continues to proliferate through every side of the business in our industry. And I think
Exactly.
we need to be showcasing that more. And I think that's why I really like that panel idea, John. Sorry, I'm stuck on that. We're gonna have to make that happen. That was a good one. I'll give you credit for that.
You can take credit, Mateo. Come on.
The let's and any more. I mean, I don't want to not shout out Mark from Boostly as well, Mark Simpson from Boostly.
Yep.
And
Derek
so
from
I'm not
Nashville.
looking at the list. You took
Great
some.
presentation. Derek from Nectar also.
Yeah,
was
Derek
good.
from Nectar, that was awesome. A couple more shout outs. Andrew Bates from Safely did a really amazing job talking about insurance of all things, right? Making it exciting.
Brooke
Brooke
Fintori had a great presentation.
I recently signed up with Brooke to grow my inventory, so I'm a fan. And like we were talking, like Brooke is an amazing human being on top of being an amazing business person and everything else. So shout out to him. And there are others, but the last person I want to shout out, Noble Crawford, was on a panel on midterm rentals, and he was out of time, but he had so much like knowledge to share. His new target for midterm rentals are airline pilots and stewardesses who need 3-month stays in different cities, right?
Right.
And he was out of time, but he's like, dude, I gotta share this. And he kept on dropping these nuggets. And I was just like, dude, you're so awesome for like not just like adhering to the time. He went like 5 minutes over because he had to share like what this new area was all about.
So Noble and I connected a little bit, and we're gonna get Noble on the podcast soon because we want to hear his story. There's a lot of the people that we've chatted out that we have had on the podcast. A lot that we haven't need Michael on. Michael had talked about what's his partner's name? I am on in their podcast. STR Secrets.
Emmanuel Powney.
Yeah. So I was talking to them. They're going to get us on their podcast, talk about Derailed and what we're doing over here in No BS. But we want to get them on, want to talk to them, but definitely want to shout out to Noble. I'm excited to get him on the podcast and to learn more about what they're doing with the midterm rentals.
Yeah.
And I heard Julie and Will were killing it as the moderators of the conference, man. So shout out to them.
They killed it. I mean, they kept it going. They made it fun. That one point when Mark Simpson was on stage, right? I mean, this was obviously all planned, but Mark Simpson says, "I'm the guy Airbnb doesn't want you to know about." And then Will Slicker comes out, slaps Mark, and says, "Get my Airbnb out of your mouth," right?
That's funny.
Hey, that's awesome.
I mean, all right, I'm going to go ahead and do it. Shout out to Will. Like I've seen him. I saw Will at the Book Direct show, which he helped co-run with Damien and everyone down in Miami. He is grown immensely as a speaker, as a presenter in a short amount of time. He's coming of his own. He was great at Book Direct show. No, I'm not discounting, but he was definitely a little nervous there. Huge shout out to Will Slickers because like he's stepping up. He's stepping into some shoes that I don't know if he knew that he could do it the way he's doing it. He's doing a great job. And so this is me shouting out to Will. Congratulations. It was fun to watch him at STR Wealth.
Can I just put one thought in your heads?
Yes.
Think of where lots of us in the industry were 3 years ago, right? So right as the pandemic was hitting, and where a lot of us are now, right? So Will, Mike Sjogren, you guys, myself even, right? Like there's been tremendous growth and shift in the industry in the 3 years. And in most industries, this kind of growth would take decades. Like you wouldn't even imagine that you can do that. And I kind of wake up and pinch myself every morning. I'm like, what? Where was I 3 years ago? And where am I now? And I'm like, wow, like this industry has given so much, back to me personally. And so that's kind of where I like, when when I share my experiences and everything, it's because it's given so much to me. I'm like, why not share, share what I've learned along the way. So I'm 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 jumping on what you said about Will. Even Julie George, I met her in 2019. I was the only person who had actually met Julie George in the short-term rental world in the United States. And during COVID, the ongoing joke was John's the only person who can validate that I actually exist, right?
Right. Not
Now
just
Julie
on
George,
Audible or whatever you got. It was
right.
Hangouts, or I can't remember what that is.
And now, she's MC, she's everywhere, right? So it's like
Big shout out to
3 years is not a lot of time, and we've made some huge shifts. So just put that in perspective that way.
Well, with that, and I love that. And thank you so much for joining us. We have to wrap up this episode. We'll have you on again soon. For those of you that want to learn more about TechTape, want to learn more about John and what he's doing, go ahead and follow the links, and it will bring you to John's endeavors. As for us, if you're not listening to Derailed, listen. By the time this comes out, there will be 3 episodes that you need to listen. A ton of our friends are in the industry, are participating. A huge shout out to Cassiola, our main starring role sponsor. Shout out to Dennis and the whole team over there at Cassiola for taking care of us and making this possible. It's a great, if you're not listening, go ahead and listen. It is fantastic. And John, thanks so much, man. Appreciate you. This is our 98th episode.
Oh,
I think 98th episode.
wow.
97 or 98. I didn't look before. 100 episode dropping in just 2 more weeks. So again, talk about growth.
Good one.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. Really enjoyed the conversation. And we'll meet up when we meet up.
See you soon. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, guys.
This podcast is a Hospitality.fm production.